an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood. Season 1, well, it's all Season 1. Episode 52, Combined Strength. In this episode, it turns out that Sloth is super duper fast. And I find it surprising we haven't actually seen that used, but I guess the point is that he is slothful and wouldn't want to. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. So, this starts off right where we left off, as tends to be usual, with Al in the midst of the dust cloud fight, as it shall heretofore be known, with Pride and Kimblee. And he is using the dust, we find out later, to predict the direction of the wind as a cover. And this is so smart, and honestly, I was so proud of him. I had a suspicion that when he came out that wasn't actually him, but I don't think I believed that he would be able to simultaneously use his alchemy to control the sort of puppet version of him and also trap Pride in, I don't know what to even call it, an enclosure, I guess. And it makes sense to me, not only because he's a less powerful alchemist than his father, but also he had split his attention at the time. The one that he makes for Pride doesn't seem to be as, impressive. It's not as big. The walls aren't really that thick. When we see Pride break out of it, it doesn't have the same sort of cave-looking entrance that the other one does. But at the moment, it's pretty fun because he has this, what do you call it? Oh my God, Philosopher Stone. Guys, I don't know why I just want to say Sorcerer's Stone so bad. I want to say it. I'm just realizing now, y'all, did I misunderstand this? I was interpreting this whole time that there was a dummy version of him that he was, but I'm realizing that's not it. He just ducks away in the midst of all of this dust, right? Or are there two of him? I really, really thought that it was that he had sort of fashioned a double and that the Philosopher's Stone allowed him to do that. But is that not what was going on? Is he just, ducking and hiding and making it sort of feel to a viewer like there's more than one of him? I don't know. I really thought for sure I understood how this went. And now I'm stopping and thinking about it and going, oh, maybe not. Okay. Zijiegi says, no, there's just one. Okay. Yeah. Well, I really thought that there were two and that was the result of him having the Philosopher's Stone. But really, he shows them that he has it and then engages with Kimblee. And I can't help but feel like if the reason that I thought he showed it when I thought there were two of him was to distract them and keep them focused on the dummy by baiting them with this stone. If there's only one of him and he showed it to them, I feel like that was a really bad call. Don't let your enemy know that you've gotten a power up like that. Just surprise them. Regardless, all of this this dust in the air results in a very dramatic entrance, and him and Pride begin to go back and forth, and Kimblee chimes in enough to sort of distort things and give Pride openings. And eventually there is a moment where it seems like, oh, Al is going to get got by Pride because Pride can smell where it is he's standing. He was relying on the dust cloud to not be able to tell. But the fact is that I don't need my eyes to know where you are. And it turns out that he kind of does, because just using the wind can change everything. And Al winds up somewhere that Pride had not expected. And he has this like sort of explosive device that I thought it was also just, it's not another flashbang like grenade. It's the stone that he's using to cast this light. Am I right about this? I'm feeling very unsure of myself in general all of a sudden after that like massive mistake. So now I'm going to be like double checking with you guys on everything that I have that right. But Al uses this bright light once again to separate him from his shadow, and then completely wraps Pride up in a very, very small pyramid that is dwarfed by the one next to it. They were inside essentially a stadium in the other one, and that's a bedroom. So this results in the convo with him and Kimblee, where Kimblee is like, Al, look, I'm not trying to like get you to fight me harder or anything, but I don't really understand why you don't use that to get your real bodies back, your original bodies. You would be able to do it really easily. And he then says, with the stone in hand, you wouldn't have any trouble fleeing from us. And once you got away with your brother, you could use the stone to restore your bodies, and then your journey would end, wouldn't it? And this is the kind of thing where it could easily be seen out of... Oh, Zijegi says, I think he transmutes a real flash grenade out of the ground because he can just do whatever with the stone. Interesting. Okay, well, damn. That's pretty dope. That stone, nothing to fuck with, I guess. Thank you for that, Zijegi. But I think that you could put down Kimblee asking him this question to just simply, oh, he's the bad guy trying to convince a good guy to turn away from the fight because this good guy is a real threat and he's trying to appeal to a sense of selfishness in him in order to just take the guy off the board without even having to fight and kill him. You just tell him, wouldn't this other thing be more beneficial to you? And talk him into it, and then you don't have to worry about him again. And I don't doubt that's a part of it, but really what I think this is that Kimblee truly cannot fathom anybody who gives a shit about saving other people more than doing the thing that they personally want the most. He just, I think when he asks, why are you guys doing this? He genuinely wants to know because he doesn't understand it, because that is just not how his mind works. And that's the kind of thing that it's like, yeah, that means that he's a bad man, but also isn't that just like sad to think that there's somebody out there for whom doing the right thing for others is such a foreign concept that they have to ask and get an explanation? You know, like there are a lot of villains out there who they will mock the hero for having altruistic ideals, but they will know that's what the hero stands for. Oftentimes, they will use that very tendency to lure the hero into something because they know no matter what, he's going to want to do the right thing, and the right thing is to come and get her. I say her because you guys know the stories I'm talking about. But in this scenario, it genuinely seems like Kimblee is baffled. Wait, hold on. You were in there, and your team had a Philosopher's Stone this entire time, and you guys are still fighting us? I thought the whole thing was that you wanted to get your hands on a way to restore your bodies. You have had one, then. Why are you still here? I truly think he doesn't get it. And granted, our friends have not been aware they're in possession of one. This was in Heinkel's, pocket this whole time. So it's not like they were aware and turned it down. Although I say that, Ed did turn it down, didn't he? I think that he knew they had found one and explicitly was like, I'm not doing that. Or maybe I'm just thinking about Ed saying to his father, I won't use you. But anyway, Damien says, I think part of it is also testing their conviction, since he's all about going all in on what you believe in. If Al had faltered, he would have been all over it. Sajegi says, yeah, Kimblee is a really interesting character. Yeah, I don't remember actually. Did I ask this question at the time? When Ed's dad offers to be used to restore their bodies because he himself is a giant human philosopher's stone, did he say that would kill him? Or because he has so much power, right? Their dad is any one of these regular red shiny philosopher's stones. He's 100 of them, 1,000 of them, right? So I have to imagine if they did use their dad to do this, it wouldn't kill him, would it? But the reasoning behind not wanting to use it isn't about their father's safety. It's the principle of the fact that their father is what he is due to the lives of other people, so they'd be exploiting the same lives, essentially. And I wish that I knew a little bit more about what it means to be the Philosopher's Stone. We've seen him talking to people and then seemingly dribbling off him to go in different directions. I don't feel like we have ever gotten any sort of response on what that means. No explanation of what it was that he was doing there. But if those souls are still in him and they did try to use him to bring their bodies back, would that result in their freedom? Or would those souls become part of their new bodies? Or my question is, if they would be able to free people because they were using his father as a philosopher's stone, because evidently they have a breaking point. None of these has lasted through everything. We've seen several of them break, or there's a couple that were just straight up fakes, I think. But at least the ones that were powering some of the homunculi had to break in order for that homunculi to die, right? B. Moore says, I don't think there was an implication of him dying. It was just about using the souls. That's what I thought. And I'm sort of interested, because if they were really actually killing the soul, that would be a relief, I would think. If they're trapped, I kind of feel like the souls would be eager to be used and freed in a weird way, unless using them wouldn't work that way. But we don't really know how that would work, you know? The way that, we know that envy is made up of a bunch of souls and bodies that have all been, mashed together. Greed, right now, has taken over Ling's body. But Greed had been granted his own body, right? When we met him before, had he occupied another regular human being? Or was the body he was in before the one that had been crafted specifically for him? My question is, essentially, are all of the homunculi occupied by a stolen soul or trapped soul, or perhaps more than one, other than envy? Because I'm assuming that in order to make the homunculi, you use a philosopher's stone to create them and power them. I'm assuming the same stone both to create and power them. Does the soul that they used to create them factor in at all with what the homunculi are like as people, like as characters, personalities? Or are those souls kind of gone once they're used and it's just sheer battery power, essentially? What I'm getting at here is basically, how bad is it to use one once they're made? Making one, absolutely fucking not. But if you have one that's already been made, would using it be actually a bad thing versus leaving them trapped in the stone? Which I feel like seems worse. Granted, I don't really know what either circumstance feels like. For all I know, when you're trapped in the stone, it's like you're on a resort in the south of France, and it's great. And then once you're released, it's just like complete annihilation and nothingness. So, but I'm just operating on the concept of being freed versus being trapped. It just being a black and white. One sucks and one is good. And wondering whether or not using a stone is actually a bad thing once the stone has already been made and those people are already dead and there's really nothing to be done to reverse that part of it. Unless there is a way to reverse that part of it, but nobody's really talked about unmaking a stone yet. They've talked about getting Ed and Al's bodies back, but the stones themselves and unmaking them and returning those souls to, wherever they came from, I don't recall really being much of the conversation because I think I assumed everybody knew it couldn't be done. It wasn't an option. Zidyangi says, the way I understand this, the souls you use are basically transformed into pure energy, so I'd say you free them in a sense. Okay. So, if we're going with my, extremely over-logical idea, I think using them is the right thing to do, actually. But I understand to just being like, I'm going to have absolutely no part of that. I understand the emotional reaction and not wanting to do it. I just wanted to get a sense of, if we're talking about the actual numbers, what's worse? And I will say that Al is not addressing that fact when he's talking with Pride in this scene, or not Pride, Kimblee. Really, he's comparing the scenario of staying and running, and staying equal dying, and running equals eventually getting my body back. If not that, at least being safe. But the idea of what he's using the stone for, he says, I wouldn't be able to save people. And Kimblee's like, well, you could use that and do it. And because Ed rejected his father's offer the way that he did, I assumed that a Philosopher's Stone, in order to save everyone, would be off the table for a private weapon as well. But it sounds like from the way that Al is comparing the options that he has, keeping the Philosopher's Stone and using it to power himself to better abilities with his alchemy is what he's planning on doing with it now that he has it in his hand. And he isn't planning to just set it aside and not use it because that's the wrong thing to do. So I should also mention, though, I'm talking about Ed's rejecting his father as if it were simply a matter of the stone. And I'm not addressing the fact that it's his dad, who he does not like, offering him a favor. And that really is something that I should be paying more attention to than the other thing. Even if it wasn't a matter of numbers and you couldn't quantify whether people would be better off or worse off if they stayed as a Philosopher's Stone or not. This is a dude who abandoned Ed, suddenly trying to act like, well, I can help you if you want. And considering the fact that they've been, in their wrong bodies, missing limbs as long as they have, and their dad never stepped forward to help them before, I can't help but sympathize with Ed just being like, you know what? No, fuck you. Because why wouldn't you be? To be perfectly honest, this dude has not been around when you have needed him several times now. and then he just lays something in front of you in such a way as to like test you, which is what he was doing in that scene. When Ed rejects him, he's glad, like he's proud of him for doing it. And when you really think about it, that's kind of fucked up. Like his dad goes, I'll help you finally after all these years. I'll offer help to you. But I'm really hoping that you won't take it, even though I'm your dad and should have done this ages ago, because that will prove something to me about you. Wow. Sir. I'm just going to not like his dad. That's just... I hope that all of you guys are prepared for that. But anyway, this is all happening, I believe, concurrent with the fight that's going on between the Armstrongs and Sloth. Sloth, it turns out, is super fast, but really not in good control of himself when he's fast. And I find this genius. I don't know. I'm certain that this comes up in other stuff. I've seen it in the context of somebody who has like speed abilities and they're just figuring out their speed abilities and they're misjudging things and winding up smashing into walls. But it doesn't necessarily feel that way with Sloth. It feels like that's just kind of part of the package, is like you can move super fast, but you don't get to have good control of it. That's the payoff. However, when I step back and look at it as like somebody with speed powers learning to use them, and the fact that this character who has this power is Sloth having this ability that could be very pinpoint accurate if he put in effort, and it's super not because he refused to put that effort in, works very well. I actually really like that. And, you know, I've said before that I've tried to sort of link the abilities that various homunculi have with what it is that they are supposed to represent. And I don't know if there was ever meant to be a theme there or not. I've tried to sort of twist myself into an explanation a couple of times. And ultimately sort of came to the conclusion that that wasn't what they were trying to do with the weapons and the, I don't know what to call them, the 7 deadly sins, I guess. But I think out of all of them, Sloth's is the one that makes the most sense out of everybody. Like, Greed had his armor, and I don't really know, I don't see a link there. Lust could turn her hands into spikes. Lust could actually do something that's like very similar to what Pride can do, except Pride uses shadow to do it. But it's an extremely similar idea. And Pride with like the shadow, I don't really know what link a Pride would have with the concept of a shadow. Or, yeah. The only one that really makes any sense is gluttony, and that's a really easy one. Making the gluttony guy fat who eats people. You know, like, it's right there. But I am curious if you guys have any ideas for themed weapons that you might have preferred. And I mean, when I say weapon, I mean like really literal weapon, not like, her sexuality with her weapon. I don't mean that. You gotta do something better than that for Lust. But regardless, B. Moore says there certainly is theming, but it's certainly stronger for some than others. Gluttony is obvious. Envy makes sense, taking over other people's forms. Yeah, I guess I didn't categorize that as a weapon, but really it is Envy's like main weapon. It's, other than turning into the like giant form where they're just a huge monster. Sloth being powerful and just not using it. Lust arguably ties into bloodlust. I forgot that somebody tried to make that one. I don't buy that one, but it's fine. Pride has Father's original form. Is that a weapon though? That just feels like an accident. Greed's honestly is the odd one out, but it's still a spectrum. I feel like Gluttony and Envy are really the only ones. I mean, Gluttony is so obvious that I almost hesitate to even count it, but it does. Sloth works with my, like, theorizing on why it is that way, but it's still the ability itself isn't really the symbol there. It's the fact that Sloth isn't pursuing that ability to its potential that makes it work. And that's not really the weapon. That's Sloth, you know? So I don't know. Beemore says envy has traditionally been referred to as a green eye monster. Oh yeah, no, I know that. Damien says, I'd say greed is rather selfish, so he is selfishly protecting himself from harm, greedily keeping himself safe at the extent. See, but Damien, this is exactly what I said I don't want. That's like her weapon is her sexuality kind of thing. I'm talking about a literal weapon. And Greed's weapon is like being able to make his hands into knives and turn his body into armor. And that feels weird. I mean, not weird, it's fine, but it just doesn't work with the Greed theme. But, you know, it doesn't matter. I was just sort of like wondering about that because this bit with Sloth, I was like, actually, I could make it work. It's just, like I said, not really so much about the power there. It's about the way that Sloth is deciding not to use the power. But this fight between the two Armstrongs and him, they get, like, interrupted a couple of times. And I cannot get over the intensity of the fight that is going on. And the camera then panning to, like, 2 hallways away. And these men are just straight up standing there on guard, not reacting at all. There is no way. The ceiling is pouring in. And these guys are utterly unmoved. It isn't until eventually, like, Sloth breaks through the floor and it collapses on people below them that folks start to be like, what the fuck is going on? So this fight, I mean, Sloth doesn't actually pull the weapon of speed until they do get interrupted. These guys come in, they have their weapons trained on, I think it's General Armstrong that they're pointing at that point. And they like look past her and are like, what is that thing? And even seeing that she is fighting this giant, like, literal monster, they're still prepared to either shoot her or take her into custody. And I do not understand these men. Do you want to fight this thing? Is that what you want? What are you thinking, you fucking morons? I should mention, too, one of you, last episode in the chat, you said that Major Armstrong's weapon was like artillery based, and we got to see that this time in a way that we haven't before. And it was really weird. It's basically like he's using alchemy to make projectiles in midair. And I'm not sure if he's supposed to be using the material that his, like, because he's got the equivalent of brass knuckles on. So is he supposed to be forming those projectiles from the metal of his knuckle covers, or is it like he's pulling? Well, I guess there is a moment where you see him sort of draw rocks out of the ceiling, it seems like, so I guess he's doing that. I don't know how he's pulling the rocks down, but it makes sense that if we can build giant, like, walls and barriers, we can pull rocks downward as well. So these things are turning into these huge cones. I don't even want to call them spikes. They are cones. They are gigantic, coming at Sloth. And I love at one point, Sloth goes down and says, I'm dying. I hate dying. It's a pain. And that shit got me laughing so hard. I hate dying. It's such a pain. And they're watching him. And he says coming back is a pain. But then fighting all out is the biggest pain of all. And this is when they go, say what? And these guys come in the door, and we get to see that fighting flat out is what he is about to do. So these guys are down before they know what's happened. We just see a blur pass between the Armstrongs, and a giant cave opens up on the far wall. And those dudes are fucking history. It is... He says, looks like I missed, but I don't know that, like, those guys are gone. I don't know. I think he didn't miss, but he dodges back between them again. And reminder, he just keeps completely, like, slamming into and creating these craters all over the place and not necessarily doing the damage to them that he intends. He does cut General Armstrong's arm or hand up, because we see blood pouring out from underneath her sleeve. But this is obviously not the level of destruction that he was trying to inflict. And at one point, he, like, actually gets his head stuck in the wall. It was really funny. He's just having to yank himself out after launching at her. And he gets her, and it looks like finally he actually landed a punch, because he says, finally, I got you. But when we come back to that scene, Major Armstrong got between Sloth and General Armstrong and is holding Sloth back. Now, I have to be honest. I felt a little bit of a way about the fact that Alex saved Olivier like twice in a row from Sloth, considering that she beat the shit out of him and took the house, which I had hoped was like a staged thing, but I don't think it was now. The fact that he keeps having to save her from Sloth when she just soundly thumped him, I guess. I just think it could have been her doing, like, managing to save him the second time. That's all. But he is a giant wall of a man. And if anybody is going to be able to hold up with sheer strength against Sloth, then it's probably going to be him. And what he eventually winds up doing to hold Sloth in place is essentially shoving a pillar up through the roof of Sloth's mouth. It is truly gross, and it pins Sloth in place for quite a while. Eventually, it begins to crack apart. Sloth is, like, slowly biting into it, reforming his arm, which has fallen off, things like this, in a pretty effective sequence of dread, thinking... I mean, at least for me, I was pretty confident this was going to hold Sloth for at least till the end of the episode, you know? And Sloth really begins to recover from that shit quite quickly. And I was just so irritated by it. Sloth, can't you be slothful about this for once, please? And just not regenerate quite so quick? But okay. So this is when we go to Roy and Hawkeye and Ross, and they are in their little meat truck. They have changed over the ice cream logo to the Central Meat Truck. It's very funny to me that this works, but it's fine. It's he did it with alchemy as well, not just paint. And the idea that you could just repaint the entire side of a van solely using alchemy is really interesting to me, because that means that you could do a lot of art with alchemy and not using traditional artist tools. And it's sort of like an actual practical version of using an iPad for illustration, you know? I find that very interesting, the concept of, like, I could do a wall mural as long as the color was already there, I guess, right? You can't produce the color out of nothing, but you can draw the color out, I would assume. Anyway, I got distracted, but I thought that was a neat idea. And yeah, they are coming into town and they're pulling up to the building where our dudes are in the basement fighting all of these mannequins. And shit begins to go quite left for everybody in the building. When we go back downstairs, our friends who we left with them charging into the fray last episode, I was about to say last week, but not even that long. I was like kind of excited for them because I felt like we were going to get to see them do something really major here. And instead what we get is all of them trying their best to hold back the worst of it and getting too exhausted. They all start running out of juice. Literally, the one that relies on his saliva, it's drying up. Like he can't even produce. So they're going after legs. They're trying to, once Scar actually focuses and they all listen to him and his advice, they begin to realize legs is the way to keep them from continuing to move. But at first, they're making the mistake of attacking all of these mannequins as if they were people and doing the kinds of things you would do to incapacitate a person. You would knock the wind out of them. You would slam their head. You would knock them off their feet. But with these things, that doesn't matter. The only way to keep them from continuing to come at you is to take away the means by which they can come at you, and that's their legs. So it takes a little while for them to figure that out, which I thought was kind of surprising. But regardless, I sort of did appreciate seeing them all get worn out by them. And I don't know, I think it just kind of hammers home just how many of them there are. You know, that like even these guys who are tough, they can only do this for so long. This is not an I can do this all day sort of situation. So out in the midst of the grass and trees where Al and Pride and Kimblee are, Pride manages to get out of this little enclosure. Kimblee like strolls over and releases him. But Al has managed to grip up Kimblee. Or no, not Al. Well, Al indirectly. It's Heinkel that does it. And he grabs Heinkel fully healed because they used the Philosopher's Stone. Dr. Marco used it to heal Heinkel. And now he is at full fighting capacity once again. So they're using the stone, you know, and that's not a problem for... I wonder how Ed would feel about this, though. I really do want to know, because I'm willing to attribute most of his disdain with the question before to his dad. And yeah, if you're using it to heal your men, I don't know that that's any different. Oh my God, that's true. B. Moore says, you mean like Ed's super sweet car? I forgot about that, but it did have a lot of color. So I guess I do mean that. Zadiegi says, I feel like Olivier beating Alex that easily in their fight is also a lot about the fact that Alex didn't want to hurt Olivier, whereas Olivier did not really have a problem with that. That's interesting. I think you're right. He says, I'm not holding back. I think he says those words, but yeah, you might be right. I'm not sure. I believe that he could ever truly set aside hurting her as a factor. I wouldn't say Olivier would have no chance against Alex if he had truly tried, but I definitely think it wouldn't have been that easy. I'm of two minds about this, Zitiegi. On the one, your assertion with what I know about Alex's personality makes complete sense, and I am very willing to accept that. On the other hand, that sort of implies that he let her win. And it's not like as conscious as that, but it's sort of what it boils down to. And I really hate that because I like the concept that she really beats him so much. So I don't know. I think I'm going to carry forward thinking whichever is true based on whatever works in the moment, because I kind of want both of those to be accurate. So Pride tries to take a swipe at Heinkel with his shadow magic, and Heinkel holds Kimblee up as a human shield, which works. Pride genuinely, I don't think I want to let him die. And I thought that this was going to turn out to be about something more major, like Kimblee's relationship with the homunculi was going to turn out to be more fraternal than I was expecting. But it looks like what it will turn out to be is that all Pride wanted was to consume Kimblee. I don't know if Kimblee is truly gone after this episode, because we just see him sort of get engulfed by Pride's mouth. Gluttony's mouth, I guess. Both of their mouths. And we don't see anything after that. And we have seen that when Gluttony eats somebody, they go into that weird in-between place, that unvoid that Ed and Ling and Envy all wound up in. And they were able to come back from that. I don't know if when Pride eats somebody, it works the same way. Because he's actually like the OP shadow creature. He voids in the stomach of a homunculi that were made in imitation, versus the void of something as, I don't know if I want to use the word eternal as Pride, but certainly Pride feels several levels higher than Gluttony. Would it have the same effect? Do they actually get absorbed and just never return as who they were? Or is it possible for them to just come back out the way that Ed and Ling came back out? I don't know. But anyway, he doesn't want to hurt Kimblee, and eventually he does this huge speech about how he's not Kimblee ultimately, as much as he has done to help them, is also just a fucking mortal, just a regular ass human. And ultimately all humans are just kind of pathetic, and they have a very limited time on the shelf, and there's almost a vibe of I'm doing you a favor actually by eating you. And let's see. B. Moore says the way I interpreted it is that Pride didn't want to kill Kimblee in case he wasn't terminal because he's valuable to them for reasons, but then ate him after he determined Kimblee was going to die anyway. Yeah, because Kimblee gets his throat chewed out by Heinkel. His windpipe is broken, according to Pride. So he's laying there completely unable to speak or respond. And it's pretty brutal seeing him brought down in this particular way. I was surprised because Kimblee has felt like such a high-level villain in some ways that I thought if he went down, it was 100% going to have to be Ed or Al that took him down. I never really figured it was going to be Heinkel, kind of one of the side dudes who did the kiss of death, so to speak. But if Kimblee gets absorbed, if it were the way it was with Gluttony, and he winds up in that sort of in-between place that Ed and Ling and Envy did, I guess he would just bleed out in there. Because Gluttony's body, that void was filled with blood. So it wouldn't be the first time that somebody has died in there, I suppose. And right before Pride sort of pulls away from hurting Kimblee, he turns and sees Dr. Marco by himself out in the field, and he launches a couple of his knife hands at Dr. Marco. And all of a sudden, a car crashes in between Marco and the Blades. I thought for sure, for whatever reason, that this was going to turn out to be Roy, because he is the only one that we have seen in a car recently, and my brain immediately put those two together. But Roy is literally in Central, like, as of 5 minutes ago. He just returned. I just saw him. So I don't know why I thought that. But it turns out that it's Yoki. And I love this for him. Yoki has really made a turn, and I love the fact that even him saving them and doing something kind and generous comes down to him saying, I'm not going to let you guys play hero all by yourselves. The idea that somebody would do something dangerous and selfless and self-sacrificing out of a sense of ego is so funny, and something that I don't think is addressed nearly enough. Like, we talk about people wanting to save themselves and not do stuff because of selfishness and self-preservation, but like kind of being shamed into it because everyone around you is doing that thing with no apparent qualms. That's a totally different motivation that I find much more relatable, to be perfectly honest, as somebody who I don't think of the bravest thing to do in certain situations. Like, I've noticed this about myself. I'll read a story online about, something that happened in public, and there will be comments from people about, like, well, why didn't anybody step in and do XYZ? And it's really easy to say that from, with 2020 vision and safely behind a keyboard. But it's another thing to, in the moment, consider doing something that puts you in in harm's way, essentially. And there are times where I think I would absolutely do it because I would be so moved by the injustice of the situation that my senses would flee me for a moment and I would do something kind of foolhardy. But there are also times where somebody stepping in, to me, would probably make the situation worse. And were I there, it would not even occur to me to step in, because I would think that's just going to exacerbate everything. And I am a let things play out and then cope with the fallout and get people their, deal with their consequences afterward. I'm going to let this guy flip out on this woman, but I'm going to get it on tape, and I'm going to let everybody in the world know that it happened. So yeah, he'll do his thing, but also he is never going to get away from this for the rest of his life. Stepping in between him and the woman and potentially escalating, that is something that would be a real fear for me. I think a lot of women, it would be. Men can really go from 0 to scorched earth in no time. So Yoki, as much as I want to laugh at him and mock him for the way that he shies away from all kinds of conflict and stuff. Look, we know that he was a bad guy with the way he ran his mine. Straight up terrible. I'm not trying to excuse any of that. But I hate to say it, I relate. I can't help but be like, yeah, man, I guess I would probably just do it because everybody else was doing it and I was about to look really bad if I didn't also. And it sucks to know that about yourself, but I think it's also good to be honest with yourself and not pretend you would do something a lot more heroic. I feel like if you lie to yourself about that, then you do the thing where you lie to other people about what you would do. And it gives you a real sense of superiority that you may not deserve. I'm sorry, there's some chatter going on. Zadegi says, I have to say that I really quite like the anime basically being Kimblee is a strong alchemist, but he's ultimately also just a human, so you can kill him without alchemy if you manage to sneak up on him. It makes it really quite realistic. That's true. Kimblee, the fact that Kimblee went down at all is frankly a surprise. I fully thought if Kimblee went down before the end, it would be maybe 2-3 episodes before the end. I sure didn't think it would be this far ahead. Again, he may not be dead. He may come back. But it seemed like the door was being closed on him. And also, it sort of cements what I was saying, which I was wondering what the deal was with Kimblee being tied up with the homunculi anyway and what he was getting out of it. And it turns out that, like, I guess what he was planning to get out of it was maybe an immortal body. But he seemed to think that they were, like, teammates in a way that I never really understood the confidence he had with that. And then we get to see evidence that it very much was not like that. He is a tool to them, and once the tool is broken, they will set the tool aside and get a new one. So, sorry, B. Moore says, nobody likes to feel left out. That's true. Even when we're doing foolhardy things that could get us killed. So anyway, Yoki swings up crying about how he also wants some glory and is crying. And, like, I could also see that maybe Yoki was doing this because he actually cared about everybody, but he didn't want to admit that he had started caring. So he frames it as like, oh, I was just doing this for myself, because he doesn't want to be vulnerable and let them know that he thinks that they're his friends now. That would also completely pass for me, and I would be fine with it. It would also sort of explain the crying, to be honest. So I find that a particularly appealing one. I think I may just go with that. But these, they all get into the car just in the nick of time. They hang out for way too long. And this happens a lot of the time with the fights where you have to have it last a bit longer, is you have the good guys in a definitive position where they should have bailed, and they just chill for a second too long, and they give their enemy enough time to gather themselves. So, and we literally see that happening. Like, behind all of them, Salim is like jumping to his feet and going after them. He sends all of his blades after this car, and they are flying over ditches and stuff. And I genuinely am not certain what the reach is for his ability, because they eventually seem to be out of range, but I don't really know what the range is. He was only able to go up to the edge of his container, which seemed to be the edge of the city. But there comes a point where he just stops chasing them. The camera pulls back, and Salim is just looking at a dust cloud, and he isn't actually continuing to pursue them. And I thought that he would have been able to pursue them pretty much indefinitely if they were heading back into Central, because they're not heading toward the edge of his container. And he was able to go down into tunnels and stuff miles away and attack people. At least I was under the impression that it was miles away. You know, we were all the way up at Briggs, and he was coming after guys who were in those tunnels. But he was in Central at the time, talking with Hawkeye. So I'm a little bit confused as to how far his ability can go, because it seems like it's just sort of adjusted based on what they want for the scene. B. Moore says, Kimblee ultimately just wanted to see who would win, the humans or the homunculi. Would the homunculi replace humans? How will the world change? And he helped the homunculi because that was his job. He signed up to be a soldier for them, and he takes doing your job seriously. You know, that's funny. I never really thought of that, but everybody else, you know, the idea of, I signed up to be a soldier. Yes, the guy I signed up with is a homunculi. I did not know that, though. So I will not continue to be loyal to him. That's an interesting departure from Kimblee. Like, yes, I signed up to be a soldier for a homunculi. I did not know that at the time. That does not change that I made a promise to this being that I would do what they said. So, actually, you guys are all the traitors, and I'm the one that is keeping my word. And, like, it's a completely fucked up way to try and act like you keep your word. But, like, if you're going to take things as they're written down, if you're going to do the lawyerly thing and just go by as written, Kimblee is the one that's like been the best soldier out of everyone. That by no means means that he is the best person, but certainly the best soldier. Let's see. B. Moore says, when Hohenheim went to visit Pride in Lior, it seemed that Pride was trapped in his tunnel. So the giant tunnel is somehow an extension of his container. Oh, I see. I think I see. So basically what you're saying, B. Moore, is that Pride can reach out through that one tunnel and that's it, past like Central. He can't extend past Central in general. And the tunnel was made as some place that he could like, I don't know what the word is, just like the one area where he could stretch out and affect the North, because that had to be part of their like blood sigil, right? Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, B. Moore, because I don't like to be too much of a nitpicker about certain things, but something as basic as like how somebody's weapon functions, I really want that to be consistent, because otherwise it can feel like you're just going to do whatever you want. So that being the one spot where he can like pass the area of Central. That said, though, if he's standing out here now and he isn't like, is it just that his shadows can't pass the container, or Salim himself in his body can't pass the edge of the container? Because it looks like where they're standing, as far outside of Central as they are, this should be out of bounds. And even if it isn't out of bounds, he should still have been able to keep chasing their car. Because if he's standing here and they're heading back toward Central, yeah, like I definitely get what you're saying, B. More, about like the tunnel thing. And that explains how he gets that far up. But it doesn't really explain him seeming to just let them go here and choosing to not. Maybe he just decided that it wasn't worth it, but it doesn't feel like it costs him that much energy to use the shadows and go as far and as fast as he wants to go. So the idea that he pulled back just because it was too hard, I don't feel like that holds water compared to what we have seen otherwise. But I don't know. It's just like that. It all comes back to he could have kept pursuing them and he didn't. But anyway, we have then under the Central, like the tunnel area, we are still dealing with Mei Chang and Envy. And Envy, reminder, got their full body back by absorbing a bunch of the mannequins in the last episode. And Envy continues to grab more of them. And Mei Chang finally, because Envy is sort of laughing at the fact that they're getting bigger and stronger with every single one of them that they consume. The thing that they are missing is that Mei Chang can dodge them. And if there were a bunch of these things coming at her, it would be a lot harder. But because all of them are being absorbed into Envy, it's just basically one being. So you can be as strong as you want, but I'm very good at dodging and ducking, and strength doesn't really play into it, so I'm able to get away. And as Mei Chang is running away, she says all of these mannequins are powered with Philosopher's stones, so they won't die. That's where their immortality comes from. But I'll still find a way. I must, to save my clan. I cannot emphasize enough to you guys how little this fucking part of the storyline works for me. It's a shame because it brings things to a screeching halt. Her motivations for needing to find the secret to immortality feel so silly. Like, just I have never met any of her clan. I have never heard any very specific stipulations for what it would mean to even find the answer to immortality. I don't have any reason to believe that it would save them. And then, setting all that aside, the fact that she has found out about Philosopher's Stones and has known that this is what the secret to immortality has been for the homunculi and everything this whole time, and still thinks, oh, but there's got to be another way, and it's here that I'll find it. It doesn't make any sense to me. She has found a place where they have achieved immortality, yes, but they do it at the expense of hundreds and hundreds, thousands, perhaps, human lives. And that's how they do it, girl. And maybe there will turn out to be another way, and I will feel silly. But as it stands now, her motivations for like rushing back into the center of everything, they feel so weak to me. And she, as a character, has just served to be an idiot and bring Envy back to where Envy wants to go to, and put them all at risk for a prize that she has no reason to believe exists here. So all of this combined just turns into something that I'm genuinely like, what is this? Why is this even part of anything? Find another way to get Envy back to Central, and like cut Mei Chang's character entirely. I feel like she could be cut pretty easily at this point without affecting all that much, as long as you found another way to get Envy back here. And again, I may be totally wrong about this, and she'll wind up being crucial in some other way, but all of it feels really contrived and very thin. And I wish it wasn't, because I hate having a part where you come back to it and you go, ugh. And that's what she is for me. It's too bad, because I really liked her when she first showed up. You know, I really enjoyed how like goofy and young she was, and her little mini panda. And it's just a shame that at this point I sort of roll my eyes when she turns up. Zadiegi says, I always felt like he can't get past Central / the tunnel in his pure shadow form, but he can move physically away from Central in his Salim container. But I don't really know how far away from Salim he can project his shadows. I'd assume there is a limit, though. And that's what I'm saying, because the Salim container was in Central talking to Hawkeye, and his shadows were almost at Briggs when he was attacking those guys. So that is a hell of a reach. And I don't know if it's supposed to be that like the tunnel affords him a greater reach than he would normally have. But it's just overall where he was standing. If we were functioning with the same reach that he had to get all the way to Briggs, he should have been able to get them no problem. B. Moore says, I think the point of this is to demonstrate that Envy operates not by fighting, but by manipulating people and always getting them to do stupid things and fight each other. But yeah, it feels quite contrived. Yeah. Even if Envy managed to do that using shape-shifting, but because that's interesting. Like, you can frame somebody for doing something in the way that she tried to do for Ross. They try to do for us, but with more witnesses and make it more convincing to everybody. But to just be like, hey, little girl, why don't you do this stupid thing? Feels like, Envy, you could do better. So we come back at this point to Ed fighting all of these things and figuring out how to take their legs out. And they can't believe how many of them there are. They've created a sort of donut of fallen bodies around themselves, and there are just more and more of them anyway. And just as they're starting to be like, I really don't know what the fuck we're going to do, Roy comes in, and he blows them all back. I'm not sure if it's just that he, like, burned a bunch of them to death or what. It's not really... It's just an explosion. And then when the smoke clears, everybody stands up and there are some bodies down. Some of the mannequins are down, but not all of them. And it doesn't really necessarily look like... He apparently saves Ed because somebody was sailing in to attack him from above. But I wasn't really sure exactly what it was he had physically done. Because if he used fire, I would have thought that would affect everyone standing there. I don't know how much he can direct his fire, to be honest. I don't know what kind of control he has over that. So he steps in and he says, maybe I could lend you a hand, Fullmetal. And that is the end of the episode. It really it felt very abrupt, but I am glad to see the gang starting to regroup again. And I don't know what's going on with Winry. She went home. Is she still there? Is she just chilling? She went home, right? I can't remember what they did with her. And Al is in the car and he's with the rest of Scar's crew, and they are going to be coming back to Central. So pretty soon we're going to have everybody all together again. Other than Winry, who I do consider kind of a core member of the group, even though she's not a fighter. So I'm looking forward to that, to seeing everybody. And, I don't necessarily think that they're all going to wind up in the same building. I'm sure they will all encounter various obstacles and remain separated. But the closer and closer together they get, the more excited I am, because first of all, that means that we're getting closer to the big fight. But also, a lot of these people, when you stop and think about it, have barely met each other. And I'm just looking forward to people realizing who their teammates were on this whole thing, I like to just see people becoming friends and who gets along and who doesn't like each other. That's kind of the fun part. So yeah, that is the end of the episode. There's no post-credit scene. I checked. So I'm going to have to wrap this one up. But thank you guys again so much for coming and hanging out in the chat with me. I hope that you guys are enjoying the coverage. I'm going to be having some slots opening up for another episode or another series to cover. And if you guys are interested in booking something, email unspoiledpodcast@gmail.com and let me know. And I will see if we can fit you in or what we're going to do. And yeah, with that, until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.